Good morning. How's everybody doing? All right. Well, Zoe and I are here to chat about UTMB Valhöll, which is the weirdest freaking name I've ever heard for a race. Did I get the pronunciation?
Valhöll.
Valhöll?
Yeah. I Googled it because we had a discussion about it and you said it wasn't related to Valhalla, but the best information I could find said it was related.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like in there, I translated it from the Spanish on their website and it said like Valhalla refers to the place where like brave warriors go when they die. And I was just kind of like, that's an intense name for a race.
Yeah, that's super intense. UTMB Argentina would have just been fine for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cumbrecita Belgrano would have been great.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to die. I'm not a warrior. I'm just here to jog.
We're peaceful warriors.
Yeah.
We're not going to Valhalla
No.
anytime soon, hopefully. No. All right. Well, yeah, let's keep diving in. If you guys have questions, I see a lot of people popping in now. Feel free to use the chat box. We can, if we've got time at the end, I know we'd love to address some specific questions if you guys have any. But really, we're just hoping to, recap the race a little bit, use this as a way to, offer you guys some insights into how we set goals, what our mindsets are like going into challenging races, international races. Hopefully there's some insights and takeaways that are relevant to all of you guys. I think a lot of, especially around the goal setting stuff. I just think that as we'll get into, it was a really difficult winter in the Western states out here. A lot of snow, very not ideal for training for a 50 miler in spring. And I know I have a lot of great insights there that will help athletes and all of that. So I'm excited to get into it and the specifics of the race. So maybe, so you want to
we just start with how we did, because I feel like that's relevant right up top.
All right. Yeah. Well,
how'd you do?
Well, I was third and you were third.
I was third.
Which is cute and funny.
Yeah.
Not planned. Got third, but we did well, international podiums. And
punching a ticket to CCC.
Right. We both got back into the world championships, which was...
Well, one of us got back. One of us qualified for the first time.
Oh, right. Yeah, you qualified. Cool. Yeah, first time. Me, second time.
Yeah.
And third time, because I read on the internet that we're in for 2024 as well.
Oh, I thought it was just 2024.
No, it's 2020 this year and next year.
And not 4?
No, and.
Oh, well, I'm only going next year.
Yeah, so we're in for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Possible carrot.
See you guys in Shan.
Not sure. Well, all right, we got it out there. I know I'm not super into always talking about my results, but why did you choose this race? I'm curious. I want to dive into the why behind, there's a bunch of international races at UTMB that went down in May. Why did you choose to go to Argentina?
Yeah. So primarily we had both signed up for a 50 miler in March in California that got canceled because of weather. Which, I was just planning on using that as a rust buster and kind of opening up my race season with a straightforward 50 miler that got canceled. And I have a pretty big ambitious race season coming up, and I'm running, hopefully weather allowing, in the San Juan summer solstice 50 miler, mountain 50 miler at the end of June. And that is not a race I want to go into without significant time on feet under me and without some pretty significant training and racing stimulus. You need to bust a lot of rust before a race like that. I'm also gearing up for a 100 miler at the end of the season. So I respond really well to big race training stimulus. So that was kind of the why of the why do a race? Why do a 50 miler? And then the location was because TJ wanted to go, which is normally not that's not normally how I roll. Normally I need to feel very attached to an event. I want to call the shots. I want to feel like it's something I chose for myself 100%. But, in terms of like international travel and just like life and finance considerations, it made a lot more sense to like both of us go do the same thing than like us try to like fly all over the world everywhere.
Yeah, I love all of that. I think that there's huge takeaways there for athletes. And I think I was talking about this on a deep dive call with an athlete yesterday. I mean, a really effective approach as an athlete is to, you kind of have 2 feet grounded in the present. The work that you're doing, you understand the day to day, but you've kind of got, I don't know, one arm back in the past and one arm up in the, looking ahead. And so you're kind of using the past to guide the present. And then you're using, the present training to get you to where you want to go in the future. And when you've got a big race season on the docket like you do, it's really important to recognize like what are the stepping stones that I can put in place in the present moment to then lead me to these bigger races later. And like when I think for Colorado folks, getting into the San Juan summer solstice is a huge deal. It's a coveted mountain race out here in some of the most iconic and
it's
beautiful,
like a baby hard rock.
Yeah, it's a little baby hard rock. It's a 50-mile version, maybe. It's kind of, like Telluride mountain runs, like kind of like a baby, like it's in the same vein as that.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's really coveted. It's a lottery process to get in, and you got in, and like, that's a pretty big deal. And I think recognizing like, maybe I don't think you totally committed to Argentina until after the race in Marin got canceled.
I was very reluctant to commit to the race in Argentina because my spring with work was just insane. I'm in the midst of planning my book launch and marketing around that. I am running like 3 magazines. I am coaching. I had to go cover the Boston Marathon. We had friends getting married. I had to do a work trip to Seattle. I had family stuff going on. It was just like on paper, not the most ideal time to be like, oh, great, I'll just train for, an advanced 50-mile international race with like CCC stakes on the table. But after the race in California got canceled, I realized that I was really hungry to compete again. And I wanted to honor that and just like let go of like, all right, like you can get the training that you need to done. Will it be perfect? It will unlikely be perfect, but you can do way above the minimum. Like you've got your bases covered. So like it was for me, like I tend to be a perfectionist in my training, which is not super helpful. So it's about letting go of perfection.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good for you, Zoe. I mean, I love that you use this also as an opportunity to address some of the inner work that you're doing to develop as a person and an athlete. And like, I think, it takes a lot of courage, and we definitely, behind the scenes had a lot of back and forth on, were you going to race? Were you even going to go?
Oh yeah. Well, cause I was also like, I had told my coach I was going to do it and I was training for it. Like I was committed. I was setting myself up to like not be wishy-washy. And I think that was helpful, was like, even mentally, I was like, okay, well, I want to set myself up where I can make this decision and feel good about it and confident that if I go, I'm like ready to crush. So like I was putting in like 80, 90 mile weeks before I had like 100% like committed to buying a plane ticket.
Yeah.
Buy the ticket with your legs first would be my advice.
Well, I think like the takeaway there is like, you were, and this is, I get the view of this every day, is that, life was really busy. Not only were you traveling for work, we had a lot of personal obligations, starting in December, really at Christmas. And it kind of has gone up until this race, and, traveling every 2 or 3 weeks. And that's not typically normal for us. But like, I think as athletes, we're often seeking like a perfect moment to be like, I'm going for an international race. I want to step up and, race at a higher level. I want to try to get back into the world championships or qualify for the world championships. Like, this has got to take place in a vacuum, or else how is it possible? And, the reality is, for both of us, this was a really imperfect time to go for it. And maintaining that belief in that dream, even when things aren't going well, is like a really radical act. It's a very courageous act. And I think like it's key for athletes to realize that like things don't have to be perfect and they often won't ever be. And so if you're waiting for that to sign up for a race or for permission to go for something that's big, you're going to wait forever.
Yeah, I think, and like, again, this all has to be built on a foundation of self-awareness. If you're someone who struggles to do the minimum training to be prepared, that is a different thing. And that is equally valid. That's just like a different journey. I, through a lot of like developing self-awareness as an athlete, have come to realize like you tend to strive for perfectionism. Let go of that. Like, you're always doing way above the bare minimum to like show up, run healthy, even compete. And like, there are reasons when it would maybe even be okay to show up like with the intent of not like competing to your potential, but like there's a training, like, sort like, if, there is an intention behind everything I do. So if you're the athlete who sometimes tends to over program themselves and to not be consistent in the training, that's kind of a different thing.
Yeah, totally. And like,
it just takes self-awareness to know who you are.
And I mean, I think you've grown so much there. And I want to just put that out to the universe and whoever listens to this. We should recognize and celebrate that stuff, because it's the inner work that sets us up for the success that you had at a race like this. It's not necessarily the training. Like you said, like, you've already got the training down.
Yeah.
A training, as you've described to me, is a non-negotiable. Like, you don't care how busy your day is, you're going to get out there. If you have to do it at 5 a.m. when you're covering the Boston Marathon, you're going to do it, and you're going to get like what you need to get done.
Yeah.
And that's within a healthy standard.
Right.
Like, if there were multiple red flags, you're at the point
right.
where
Again,
you
it takes self-awareness. Like, but yeah, I mean, there were a lot of days in this build where like I was running before an early flight, because like I've never once had it come to pass that after the flight I'm able to run.
Yeah, that's
even one time I was scheduled, I was doing a meeting with a big running brand out in Seattle. Tons of travel delays. I'm in 3 different airplanes all day. I land like right before dinner, right before I'm scheduled to go do I need to look fancy and be kind of dialed in for a presentation with this brand. And I looked at my watch and I was like, you have 25 minutes. That is all you have. Like, make the most of it.
And it makes a difference.
Yeah.
That consistency, it does make a difference. So like, hell yeah. I thought that was so badass.
I definitely texted you to complain about it because I was pissed, but
again, we are externalizing. We're not keeping things inside.
Yes.
And I think that's healthy. And like, if we're trying to compartmentalize all that and we're not recognizing that it is hard work to make those sacrifices, that it is a real commitment to yourself, the goals that you have, the season that you have coming up. If we don't recognize and externalize that and celebrate it, I think we're missing out, and we're not connecting the important dots that we need to connect as athletes to then totally like have that like real inward transformation and reframing of things as we move forward, so that we can continue to have these like this really strong inner dialogue and this ability to like continue to go for goals that are meaningful and like push you and like have all those ingredients that you like. Like, if we're not connecting those dots, it's way easier to fall back into old patterns. And for you, like, that would be like perfectionism or something like that. So that's awesome. I mean, like, I know you were really busy with Boston, and man, like, we just had so much personal travel too, and supporting, people that are important to us in our lives and like really showing up. But like, what was your training like? I mean, this winter was freaking brutal. And, I think for both of us, we were really training for Marin as like that dust the rust off race.
Yeah.
I personally was really hoping that Argentina wouldn't be my first race back after CCC. But you know, like that's just the way things went. But like it snowed 2-3 days a week here. It was just crappy. Like, how did you
solidarity with our Colorado runners?
Yeah, like how did you deal with that, knowing, you know, both Marin and Argentina were 50 milers with 10,000 feet of climbing, like super steep. One ended up being more technical than the other one was, but like, what was how did you work through that?
Yeah, I think, you know, just consistency. And like, unless the weather is dangerous, I just like, I run and whatever. I actually, at the end of the season, noticed that it was really just like taxing me mentally and emotionally to be running outside in the snow a bunch. And I really wanted to prioritize quality of workouts and quality of runs because I don't have a ton of time to just be like, you know, vision questing out in the snow. So I did several workouts on the treadmill. I did a lot more runs on the treadmill than I've ever done in a season. And I embraced and made friends with the treadmill, which is like not my normal thing. But what I would do is I would just like make a banger playlist, or I'd pop on like a Robin Arzon, like Peloton running video, and I wouldn't like listen to the workouts, but I would just like have someone motivating me, coaching me up, being inspirational. Because it just like, I noticed like when life and work were really hard, the last thing I needed was to go just like slog in the snow for 10 miles. I was just like, yeah, you are allowed to choose the option that doesn't take you to the end of your patience today. Like that is a good decision. That is quality training. And especially like, you know, not trying to do speed workouts on ice, because last year I think running too much on the snow and ice has led to some like tendon issues. So I was just like, yeah, like wear shorts and a sports bra and just like hammer it out in the gym. But again, it was just consistency. I put down one of my like my highest volume training block to date, a lot of aerobic work, still mixing in some speed work, but definitely like a block that would support a big mountain sort of summer, even though it was super snowy. So we didn't really have access to trails till like months later than we normally would. So on the weekends, I would drive to Fruta with Coach Kylie and we would run, trying to get as much vert and technicality as we could, still pretty limited.
And that's an hour and 45-minute drive both ways from our house.
Yeah. But when you're doing it with your best friend and your dogs, it's pretty fun. So I think that like, it was like every week I would just be like, if you can execute the training this week, make it as easy, like don't make it hard on yourself, make it easy on yourself, Zoe, don't be an asshole to yourself, and then celebrate on the weekends with Coach Kylie in the desert.
Yeah, I think it's really awesome that you did that. And it's so funny when I zoom out and look at that training block, it's like, man, we only had trails for like 2 weeks here.
Oh yeah.
And it was like one of my, I think my Strava, you know, says it all. You too can love Red Hill. It's just not like meant for runners. It's
I think
meant
I
for
actually do
bikers.
love it now. Like I've run on it. I've already like PR'd my amount of trips up the hill.
It's taken us about 3 seasons.
There was a moment where I started to feel a little bit panicky about being prepared for the vert and like with all the travel we were doing. And I think I just like came to a point where I released it. I was like, you are doing the best you can. You aren't like, there is nothing within your control that you could do better. So just release everything else. Like you can't, like stressing yourself out, wishing you lived in Boulder is like not helpful. Just, you know, use what resources you do have available and release the rest.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that idea of just trying to make peace with what you have and not getting too in your head about, you know, what might happen on race day. And although we want to, you know, have one hand in the future, we want to be thinking about what's coming up and not being blind by the realities of the race. We also need to recognize like, what are our limitations right now? Well, there's 5 feet of snow on every trail. There's no way.
Yeah. And also like I was traveling a lot. So I was able to like, I got to, you know, do a trip to Seattle. So I got to run Tiger Mountain, which was super sick. And I traveled to Bellingham and I got to run in the Chuckanuts, which was amazing. And then, you know, we had some friends get married in Kentucky. We got to run in the Daniel Boone National Forest. So like I was able to get some kind of novel for me training stimulus in, which was really great and helpful, like sea level mountain running, which is the sickest concept of all time. and do so in a way that, again, I think like forefronted, like where it felt like training was just like folded really neatly into life. I also did a lot of just like bare minimum strength and resistance training, just like the least that I thought I needed to do. That's what I did. Like I carried my big resistance band with me on all the trips, so I could do my PT and hip strengthening, glute activation, did 20 push-ups a day in whatever hotel room I was in, just like the really bare minimum that I needed to do to be healthy, do my PT, correct imbalances, support the downhill running I was doing. I didn't overthink it. I didn't make it fancy. I just did the bare minimum with that.
Nice. I think a lot of athletes really overemphasize the need for strength, and
I'm talking like 15, 20 minutes a day. Yeah.
Man, you don't need to do a lot to be prepared. And
like, frankly, I didn't have time to do a lot. Like
right.
when I was working the Boston Marathon, I was working I worked like a 16-hour day. So there's just like no need to be trying to do a bunch of like squats when the real need is to just like make sure you get 3 to 5 square meals in and sleep.
It sounds to me like you were really just doing the targeted stuff that you knew that you needed to do to stay healthy.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's we've done multiple talks on strength work and cross training and all of that. And it's just like, that's all training stress, my friends. Like you can't add that on and do all the high miles too. Like it doesn't all work together like that. So if you want to
you have to be really intentional with all.
Yeah. Like if you're doing 90-mile weeks, you're doing very minimal strength to balance out that stress.
Yeah. And my strength always supports the running.
That's awesome.
It's not because I love it or anything. It's fine. I feel neutral about it. It just supports my goals and supports healthy running.
Yeah. Yeah. Heck yeah. Well, let's back it up a little bit. I think the reason I lived in Argentina for 3.5 years. And so that was really the impetus for choosing to go back to Argentina and racing there. And I, wanted to experience the culture there and show Zoe some of the culture that has had like profound impacts on my life. And that, I think really that was like the core. If we were going to zoom out, that was like the big connection to the why travel 7,000 miles and spend a lot of money to go race there when we could have done Desert Rat. We could have done any number of other canyons, international races that were much closer and easier to get to. And again, the important stuff here is that this goes back to how do we connect our goals to the deeper parts of ourselves. If you have that connection, it becomes so much more powerful when you're out there actually running the race and going through the challenges, when you're able to draw on those deeper things and you're not just like racing for the sake of racing, or I want to do this race because it's competitive, or like we've got these very surface level, or I would say for me, those would be surface level reasons to do a race. For me, historically, that's not enough.
We had like a 7-layer bean dip of reasons.
Yeah. And that was super, super cool. I mean, that made the whole thing just so meaningful to me, especially, having not gone back to Argentina for 6 years after, spending so much time there, and really like learning getting to experience the country on an intimate level, not a tourist level, but like a really deep level. That was for me like, man, I've got to like take this opportunity to go down there and I'm going to make it work no matter what, train through a difficult winter, spend a lot of time on a treadmill, do a lot of tread hills, which are my least favorite thing to do. Pretty much. Those are just like a vehicle for self-loathing for me. So an opportunity for the inner coach to come out, and boy, is it tough. But yeah, I think like it was so fun to like have done all of that work and have such imperfect training, and then, fly down there and like get to experience the event itself. Yeah, I'm curious, Zoe, like what was your I don't know, like, what was it like just like getting down there, getting a lay of the land? Like, how was it on like your normal routines and habits and stuff? Like, and how did
I
you deal
mean,
with the impacts there?
it was just like the gnarliest travel ever to get there. Like we had to take like two planes just to get to Buenos Aires. Then we had to take a taxi across Buenos Aires to a different airport in Buenos Aires, fly to Cordoba, rent a car in Cordoba, drive 2 months. Like it was just like the opposite end of the earth from where we live in rural Colorado.
And driving to Denver.
And driving to Denver.
Yeah.
It was gnarly travel.
Almost 2 days.
But I think like for me, like plane travel, the two keys are compression socks and snacks. That's all there is.
What about ZQL? There's a little ZQL going
I take
on.
ZQL on the night so I can sleep.
Yeah, I got a good 5.
And I drink Element on the plane to try to hydrate. And I do walk around, just do normal things to make your body not feel like trash, and eat more. Like, I think, there's some folks that like when they're traveling and stressed, like their inclination might be to like skip a meal. Don't do that. Eat all the food, eat all the snacks. It wasn't like too crazy different. There's a little bit of a time change. It's like on Eastern time. So it was 3 hours ahead, which isn't too terrible, especially because like I had been on the East Coast for like 10 days before the race. So my body was like pretty confused and like, where am I anyway? The food was pretty, like, it wasn't like a huge issue. I don't know. I feel like we set ourselves up for success by like not over programming ourselves. We scheduled some times to go recce the course and just like hang out, chill. So I think we really set ourselves up for success there. We weren't trying to do like big touristy things. We did like chill, food oriented touristy things. Split a couple pints of beer during the week, just to, enjoy being there and be present, be in the moment, and like enjoy each other's company. And yeah,
I think that was a big change that we had made from when we were out at CCC. I know for me, that the race at CCC came at a moment in my life where there was a confluence of stress that really was was just knocked over a full cup, and was just way more than I could handle, both as an athlete and a coach. And I think, when we talked about how to set ourselves up for success at this race, knowing, the last time I had raced was really not a very pleasant experience in any way. And you guys can listen to that recap, but it really taught us about, respecting the travel, having the inner courage to take the time off of work. It's especially hard for me. And, really recognizing again, the importance of the mental taper before a big race, trying to just embed yourself in the experience more or less, and not like over stress about things. Mm-hmm. And I think we actually did a really good job of balancing that. We did one drive out to the start of the race, did, a 90-minute run, checking out the first climb on the course. Then we had a big lunch. Then we went back, then we kicked our feet up and like we rested, and like, we kind of had a much healthier balance, and it, when I think about that and then how the race went, I know that gave me the mental battery to really dig deep out there, because like, as we'll talk about, like the race it went so differently than I think either of us expected. And it takes me back to the fact that like, we have so much limited control over like a lot of the stress dials that operate in our lives. Like Zoe mentioned before, she was traveling a lot for work, trying to get in a bunch of, really effective training at the same time too. And like, it's hard to find a balance there. And like, I have to say, it's probably impossible to find a balance, especially for, a high achieving person, a person who is consistently working towards growth. It's very difficult to find a balance and to make those adjustments. But over time, you learn from past experience, what dials do I have control over? Okay, I can turn down the training dial just a little bit if things are getting overwhelming. Yes, I can, turn down my work dial even a little bit if I need to, and set, more explicit boundaries and, really own those boundaries, which is something that I've really personally, I've really struggled with as a coach in the past. And so like in doing that on this trip, taking time off before and really taking that time off. And like, I didn't check a single log, and it's not for, not loving coaching and not loving and wanting to support every athlete. It's just needing to, like Coach Drew said in the parenting call a couple of weeks back, those priorities can be fluid. You can adjust your priorities, and trying to put on the athlete lens and like I'm in a foreign country and want to enjoy it lens, like all of that kind of stuff. And then again, doing that after the race, like I'm so much better recovered today because I respected the stress better and actually enacted the action steps to make that happen for myself.
Yeah, I think, the stress is obviously a huge component. I also think it is we've done a lot of work in our business and relationship around like identifying locuses of control. And I think you going into CCC, we're struggling to identify, like, do I have control over this? Do I not? Am I beholden 100% to the coaching, or like, can I call the shots and like dial up my running priority to really succeed in this race? And then, dial it back down afterwards. And I think that the same skills you need to take control and to take autonomy in work and in life, those are the exact same skills that benefit you in ultra running. Because you need to be like, okay, like, yes, I have some very challenging circumstances during this race. I'm hot, I'm dehydrated. Like, what's my locus of control? Like, what can I call the shots on here? What can I not call the shots on here? Like, can I dial up the hydration? Great. I can't necessarily dial down the heat. So like, you have to like really understand that skill of like, where am I letting shit just kind of like boss me around, and where can I step in and be the boss more?
I like that idea. And I think a lot of that, the ability to do that is stemming from, experience and having, put yourself in that position to make those choices before, and maybe not have, made the optimal decision, or having made some optimal choices, but not gone far enough, and to continue to try to produce growth there and awareness around, and that whole idea. I mean, that's what freaking coaching and being a coach and being an athlete who has a coach, being involved in a community like this is what it's all about. And this is why, again, we say it, we don't work with anybody who doesn't want to work for at least 1 year or more, because you can't do any of this stuff if you're looking at one race, if you're looking at 6 months, it's not possible. Like, you need to be thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 years. This race for me was, 10 years since I had run my first ultra. Ran my first ultra in 2013. It was a self-supported effort, and 10 years, 10 freaking years, man. That's what it freaking takes. And like, if you don't believe that, and you don't believe in yourself, and you're not committed to those timelines, you're not going to achieve all that you can. You're not going to live up to your potential. And that's the unfortunate reality of all this. So like, you've got to really love that process.
Totally. I don't care how late or early in life athletes start. It's not about when you start. It's just that you keep going for as long as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And like, again, like, oh man, like, just check out those Rad Weekend updates from this past week. I have an athlete with like, I don't know, 1,200 days in his training log.
Yeah.
And that's how long it took him to do like a 2-3 hour PR at a 50K. And like, that's freaking commitment to something that you love.
Yeah.
And like, that's just the beginning, because it's been 2.5 years, 3 years, you can knock 2 or 3 hours off your 50K PR. Imagine what you can do in another 2 or 3 years. Like, and that's just the result stuff. That has nothing to do with the inner changes.
Yeah. Right. Like health, connectedness, community building, stuff that we're really psyched on, but like,
the good shit
don't always necessarily. Yeah. The good shit.
Oh man, I think it's so important to, for both of us, you've been running for a really long time too, Zoe, and like, to step back and recognize that, like, it takes a long time to get on an international podium.
Yeah.
And especially on an imperfect day. So let's talk about the day. let's talk about the race, because man, that race was crazy. So what was your mindset like going in?
Oh boy, this is going to be humbling. Looking at the course on paper, I was like, I'm ready to PR my 50. I'm in great shape. I'm really healthy. I don't know what exactly this course looks like, but I bet I'm going to PR it. Like, I could maybe go sub-8 on this course. Like, it's going to be fast. And literally 40 minutes into the course, I knew that that was not going to be the reality. Like, we had scouted the beginning and the end of the course, and it was super technical, but on paper, the middle sections looked really fast and runnable. Like, I had almost contemplated wearing like road shoes or like the least technical trail shoes possible, because it just looked so smooth and fast, or just kind of like rolling. And like, there was only 10K of climbing for the whole race. So it's like, that's not crazy. Most of it was at the back or like the last 12 miles and the first 8.
Or so we thought.
And I think like I had a really humbling experience in Mexico doing the UTMB Puerto Vallarta, because that race was just like not on trail. It was just like jungle schwacking. And I think that was really a lesson in like, just, you could be mad at what you're experiencing, or you could just like experience it and work through it. I don't love schwacking. I like technical trail, but I do like a trail. Like I
like a trail. I like the line of dirt with grass on each side.
Yeah. Just like running around in the woods, just like not my thing. And UTMB Puerto Vallarta was so hard that I really feel like almost anything I do will just be easier forever, just because like, I mean, I'll just never forget like going up like a 20% graded hill with no trail. I'm literally like pulling on vines and shit to get up. And I'm like, okay, this is running great. Awesome. There's like scorpions everywhere. And I think that, I was able to lean on the experience of that day in Argentina and be like, well, this is unlikely going to be harder. So boom, your hardest day is already done. And if it is harder, then boom, that's a new hardest day, and nothing will ever be that hard again until you do like Heart Rock or something. So yeah, we get out there, lo and behold, it is not super, in my eyes, runnable. It's very technical. It's like cross country running. Like there's just not a trail. There's just like flags across the hillside, and that's not super fast. And so I just learned to release speed, release pace, and really set my intention on moving well through the terrain. Moving through the terrain as best I could, not use, because like historically, if I get down on myself at how fast I'm moving, my brain will use that as an excuse to let up on the gas. So I eliminate that escape hatch from my mentality. And I say, like, no matter how fast you're moving, like you keep your foot on the gas. I do not care what it looks like or what it feels like. You just need to stay competitively engaged, and you need to keep applying pressure to yourself. It doesn't matter if it means you're walking, like you have to stay in it. Do not give yourself an excuse or a reason to let up. And that, like you're hopping over barbed wire fences. There was like a thigh deep creek crossing. There was like some schwacking. We had to like scramble over a technical ridge. Yeah. And so I think for me, it was just like, all right, this is not a PR day. You have enough. Like I made sure that like my nutrition, I had a lot of wiggle room so that I could go out and I could have my best day. And I was also prepared to have my worst day, just because we didn't have crew. I didn't have support. I was not going to rely on like weird UTMB aid station food. So I was carrying a lot more nutrition than I would if I was trying to go fast in the US. But I was prepared. I was like, honestly, if I need to be out here for 12 hours, like that, we can make that happen safely. I brought a headlamp. Like I had a backup headlamp in my drop bag. I had a second pair of socks and shoes. Like I went into this day prepared to have my best day or my worst day. And I had very much in the middle day.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I like the idea around making peace with the situation rather than kind of being like, it was supposed to be like this.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so much power in kind of like that Zen philosophy of accepting where you are.
Not only is there power in it, but it is truly the only way. Like if you want to keep moving forward, just being mad at the situation you're in is a poor use of energy and time. So like you have to, like, acceptance is the only way forward. Anything else will keep you stuck or will take you out of it. It's you accept or you DNF.
Yeah, 100%. Man, I guess, our mindsets were probably pretty similar going into the race. Like I definitely.
Where were you when you realized it was going to be a really long day?
I was on that ridge with a stone wall down like that mile long ridge that had a stone wall, and they kept making you go up
like a
and
24-minute mile.
And I fell off the side of it. And I was like, this is like, not what I was expecting.
Not only was I walking, but I was using my hands like the whole freaking time.
Yeah.
Great. We're running.
I mean, like, so the beginning of the race for me, I had kind of, process oriented goals, obviously, but this is kind of this is really the first race that I've gone to having visualized myself winning the race beforehand, and giving myself permission to visualize being on the podium and really competing at that level, rather than just visualizing having a strong day or, I really focused a lot on the result itself, which was prompted by, my executive coach, Jeff Patterson. He, told me to visualize the outcomes more than I have in the past. And that made a big difference for me. It definitely did, because it not only allowed me to prepare mentally for performing the way that I wanted to perform, but it also, when you back up that visualization, you're hitting all of your process oriented goals too. You're seeing yourself rising up through challenges. You're seeing yourself digging deep when things are hard. None of that stuff, you don't achieve a podium without having done all of that stuff. So like that change to my mental tactics going in, I think was really beneficial for me, particularly, the body of work, the training that I did was representative, or pointed me in the direction of a breakthrough performance speed wise going into this race. And it's probably a whole other podcast on how that happened, out of being, really sick for a number of months and really like approaching my training differently, doing a lot less training, and how that probably propelled me forward to develop the speed and get in the position to go for it.
Can I add a little bookmark here?
Sure.
So I think something that I'm always harping on, but I think is so important, is like doing the best training for who you are and where you are in life. You did less training than normal and had an amazing result. I did a little more training than normal, had an equally amazing, like we both got third. Mm-hmm. And I think that like so often there's folks out there that say you need to do more, or like you need to do less, like that there's some golden rule. And I think that it's so important to have that like self-awareness, know where you are, and figure out what the best training is for your current bandwidth and life conditions. Because ours looked really, really different. We had the same result, right? Like it's not about you always doing more and more and more and pushing through health stuff. But for me, it also wasn't about saying like, oh, well, babe, your work is hard, so we're not going to train very hard. It was about being like, yeah, work's hard. We're going to train hard. We're going to race hard. We're going hard because I could. And that made sense for me. And that was the correct decision.
Yeah, totally. You should own that. I hope you feel like you can, because again, we're two very different athletes. And so with different, we might live together, but our life circumstances are really different. Our health was really different over the course of the last.
And that's not to diminish your training. Like It was good training. It was training that responded to both of our training responded to the actual circumstances. It wasn't us trying to force something that didn't work for us. It wasn't about us accepting less than we were capable of. It was about being intentional and working smarter, not harder.
Totally. And again, that's the product of allowing yourself to do this year after year. It's a commitment that you make to yourself, to growth and to your potential. And, it's about celebrating the highs when they happen, but it's also about celebrating the lows, because without the lows, without effing this stuff up a lot in the past, you don't have the awareness to then be like, oh yeah, like I don't need to do doubles, like, or I'm not feeling great today, I'm going to do 8 miles instead of 10, or instead of 12, or instead of 14. And I did all of that. And like, that's taken me a long time to, you know, not only have the inner confidence to do that, but the self-awareness to recognize that there's positive outcomes on the other side of doing that. You know, I think that there's so much insight in that whole part of the journey. But again, like I had this, because of all of that stuff, and it worked, and on paper things were really fast for me in training. Like I was like, yeah, this is going to be a fast event. But like same situation as Zoe. You know, it kind of quickly after about an hour 3.5, I'd gotten lost a number of times, and like I was already starting to, I didn't know what position I was in. I started out in second, running with Cody at the top and feeling really strong. And my headlamp was just a piece of crap. Like I made a critical error not bringing a bright enough headlamp, and I had to back off my pacing because it was so technical. I rolled my ankle.
It was literally just wandering around the Alpine.
Yeah,
like
it was
going down a ravine. There was no trail. There had never been a trail. There will never be a trail in this location.
It was so rowdy. Like I was like, you're going to freaking go to, like, you're just going to end up in a hospital if you don't like slow down and respect that you can't see. And like, I slowed down, got lost. And then I started to make up the time on the limited portion of the course that was on a road, a dirt road.
It was literally 3/4 of a mile.
Oh my God. It was longer than that. It was a few miles.
It was not a few miles.
I don't know. I remember it differently.
It was like 8 minutes of road.
I made up time. And I felt really good about that. And I could see that on the splits on my watch.
I went hard. Any second that I could run, I went freaking hard, because there were a lot of seconds where it was just like, all right,
yeah,
we're walking around.
Yeah, I mean, it was hour 3:20, and I was like about 10 minutes behind reaching an aid station that I wanted to get to, and I realized I had lost a flask, so I was down to 2 flasks. It was hot. I was already getting hot.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was your emergency flask. Like now you're, you know, and it's taking you longer than you thought. So now you're going to be probably behind on fluids between these aid stations. That's when I kind of like, you know, I was like, cool. Like you're just, you know, we're making peace with this. Like it's going to take you longer.
Yeah.
And if you stay steady and you stay in that pocket, like leaning on what feels a bit uncomfortable, but not like fully going into uncomfortable, you're probably going to feel pretty good when you get to the last 11 miles of the race, which were really technical. And that's where I knew I'd be a lot stronger than a lot of the other athletes, because I tend to do better when it's steep and technical. But who knew that most of the other parts of the course they weren't going to be steep necessarily, but they weren't going to be on a trail.
They weren't fast.
They weren't great for carbon shoes.
No, yeah, poor choice. The Hoka Tecton X 2s, one of the greatest, quick plug, hashtag not sponsored, hashtag professional gear reviewer. Incredibly sick trail shoe if you're doing a fast trail race.
Yeah.
Non-technical. Such a sick shoe.
Yeah. I mean, I pushed the limit of what that shoe was capable of against cow pastures. I didn't know cow pastures could be so rocky, by the way.
So many rocks. So many rocks.
Learned a lot out there. All right. Well, let's talk about the last third of the race. I mean, I think that's where both of us made our moves. That's where I ended up unknowingly ending up passing a couple peeps and getting into third place. But that's also where I think everyone got destroyed by how hot it was, by how technical it was. You know, what were you doing over the course of that last, like, there was like a 2,000 foot climb. Then there was like some meandering up high, a steep descent, another climb or two rolling, that aid station they helicoptered in, which was super cool.
So cool.
Then like a brutal descent through a ravine, and then another awful climb.
They had stationed like 4 emergency rescue teams. It doesn't exactly inspire confidence when you're racing and you see like 8 people out there. They've just like preloaded the course with stretchers. Like they were ready to helicopter a bunch of people out. Like I'm not like, there were just people like camped out in the hills with like stretchers, like just prepared to like do battle. It was gnarly.
I know.
I've never seen anything like this.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
I know, actually, yeah. One of the ladies was like, calmity, tranquilo. That was, yeah. I think for me, I was just like, this is fine. Like, this is so well within your wheelhouse. Like, you're not necessarily trying to make up time now. Just run this. Like, I knew I was in third. I knew I was unlikely going to catch Emily Hawgood, number 2 in the world at this point in the race. Not that I had counted myself out, but I was like, do you need to go balls to the wall down a steep ass cactus filled ravine? No, you do not. So I went medium balls and just kind of like focused on moving well through the terrain, taking care of myself. My super advanced hydration strategy was a flask of Element, a flask of Argentinian Pepsi, and then a flask of water to like spray myself with and drink a little bit of. So I would just like, whenever I wasn't literally using my hands to like down climb this freaking mountain, I would just like keep some water on myself to keep cool, keep myself from getting too sticky and dusty, keep hydrating and just like move well. I made sure that I was fueling, because like there were a lot of moments where like my watch would buzz and remind me to fuel, but like, well, I'm like climbing something, or like this is not necessarily the terrain where it's super safe to eat. So I would just like make sure that as soon as I moved through that section, I would get a gel out, shotgun it as quickly as possible so that I didn't get behind, even though it was late in the race. I know like sometimes I'll get in a mindset where I'm like, you're almost done. Like you can skip this gel, just like push through. And that is never an effective strategy. I know for myself, whenever I'm the most tempted to skip a nutrition, that's when I most need to re-engage, make sure that I keep on that strategy. I don't give myself an out, and I make sure that I fuel like through the finish line. Like, I don't care if I can, like, if I'm in the town, if I can't see the finish line, I'm taking that gel, I'm continuing to hydrate, because that's what enables me to run through the finish line and stay strong till the very last second. So I just made sure that I was moving well through the terrain, continuing to execute my hydration and nutrition strategy. I was listening to some fun music, and I just enjoyed being out there and being like, man, this is goofy.
Yeah.
Like trail running is so goofy.
I love
it's like butt scooting down a ravine.
I love the fallback to process-oriented goals, especially in the crux of a race, and knowing, you know, what your tendencies are. Like in the past, maybe I wouldn't have fueled all the way through the finish, and I'm totally like guilty of that as well. And, you know, remembering like the habits of highly effective runners, they fuel their long runs start to finish, whether when it's time to hit that next gel, doesn't really matter if it's 10 minutes before the run's over. They hit that next gel because it makes a huge difference. The science is there to support that.
And especially like moving through really challenging, demanding terrain, you need to stay mentally engaged. And in order to do that, you need to not bonk. Like the worst place to bonk would be somewhere where you have to be all in navigating that terrain.
Yeah, totally. So there's a great question here from Eric. How did execution performance match your planning, or did it not? Were you aiming for the podium, or, you know, how did that work in terms of planning?
I was aiming for the podium, so I executed on that. I was way off on my time goal just because I didn't have the course awareness that would have actually led to me having an educated guess at the time. But, you know, I think I was just kind of using the best information I had available. And then I was able to adapt as the day went on. As soon as I saw that like sub 8, 9 wasn't feasible, I adapted my goals, and that allowed me to stay engaged. And that I knew that I was like, this is me making an intentional, informed, and educated goal change. This isn't me letting off the gas and giving myself an excuse to finish slower. This is me saying like, no, the best I'm capable of on this course on this day is this number. And that's great. And we're going to aim for that. And we're going to feel proud of that. Yeah.
I mean, my execution really was the same. It was just reevaluating what was actually happening, you know, in terms of the reality of the situation.
Yeah. I mean, that was my slowest ever 50 miler. I unsent the 50. Actually, no, yeah, definitely.
It was a really hard course.
It was a hard course.
And, you know, for me and for the athletes that I was running with out there, and it was, it felt very hot. There was no shade on 95% of that course. And, you know, the high of the day was like 78, but with, I guess, the slopes that we were on and the direct kind of like how they were
being
directly,
so far south.
directly facing the sun, it just, the heat felt profoundly difficult for me. And, you know, again, like you're kind of in management mode a lot of the time out there. And that's really what it's all about. Like when I look at my execution, you know, I was not as fast as I wanted to be in some parts of that course because I was really worried about cramping, because it was so hot, and I definitely played it safer than I normally would have, as a result of needing to like mitigate some of the things that have happened to me in hot races before, which is like a lot of really bad side stitches and things like that. And so like just knowing to temper my pacing a little bit in those warmer sections, and also getting in extra electrolytes and more fluids and taking time at aid stations to drink more was really, really vital. And I think, you know, in terms of execution, like, you know, things were not quite like where I would have wanted them to be, but you have to go with the reality of the situation, and you can't let, you know, it not exactly happening the way you visualized it impact your overall performance out there. And so like as athletes, we all get to make that choice. We get to say, hey, like, here's our reality. How do we respond? And like, hopefully, you know, you do your visualization exercises leading into an event, and you have developed some of the tools to kind of work with those challenges. You know, like if it's super technical, you don't worry about going fast. You worry about being smooth through the technical terrain and being efficient. If it's, you know, really hot, you make sure you're dousing yourself with water in whenever you can. You make sure you're upping your sodium and electrolyte intake. You're backing off on the gas pedal just a little bit to keep your, you know, your relative perceived effort a little bit lower. You know, looking back on it, it's like, yeah, do I wish it was cooler and I could have like pushed those climbs more and run a lot harder on the downs and not had worried about, you know, cramping and things like that? Yeah, of course. But the reality is that, you know, that was what I had to worry about. And those are the things that I had to mitigate in order to, you know, close on a bunch of runners, you know, later in the race. And like, I also got passed by two women out there. Woohoo. and I ran a lot with Emily, maybe 15 miles or something like that. Like we shared like the whole middle part of the course basically together. And it was super fun. But like, also as a competitive, you know, athlete, my vision was for an overall podium. And I definitely thought that I could have on a better day, knowing the course better, I could have been an hour faster on that course. But you don't get that back, you know, like you only get what actually is happening to you in reality. And like something that, you know, a skill that I've really learned over time has been to really be non-judgmental about like how that stuff is going, and not to compare yourself to other athletes out there who, you know, may be experiencing things in a different way than you. And I think that in itself allows you to hang in there and stay with it, stay the course. And like, I was passed by those ladies before I passed the guys that, you know, ultimately allowed me to get on the men's podium, and fifth overall. Like that in the past, me would have probably been really discouraged by that. But, you know, 3-4 years of working on that stuff and not having the, you know, knowing when those comparison traps can come up and stuff, and instead, you know, supporting everybody and being an active participant in helping them have the day that they should have. And, you know, all of that is going to allow you to access the deeper parts of yourself that you need to get into in order to go deep. It's not easy in the hardest part of the course on the hottest part of the day to pass people. You know, that comes from experience, that comes from my mental processes, my ability to not compare myself to other people, stay and, to stay positive, to use my inner coach, to stay in the moment, to stick to my process oriented goals. And like, part of me like never lost that vision of being on the podium, like that vision was really strong for me. And it's definitely, that was something that helped me execute to the best of my abilities. Yeah, maybe in the last 10 minutes or so here, I'm curious, like, Zoe, what's something that you felt like went really well for you out there?
Heat didn't bother me at all. My nutrition was great. I stayed flexible. I stayed present. I raced right through the finish line. I don't think I had anything that went poorly other than that I need to drill some technical running.
Yeah, that's an area of long-term improvement for you. And you've already made a lot of improvements there. And I think, God, that course was just bizarrely technical because it wasn't like technical trail. It was just
no trail,
just marked. It was just, I don't know how else to describe it.
It was like cross country running.
Right. It was just a mountainside that was marked with markers. Is there something you're thinking about working on? Is that what you're wanting to work on ahead of San Juan Summer Solstice?
Yeah, that's going to be a really technical race. There's a lot of sustained, very technical downhills. And I think just getting a little more comfortable pushing. So that's kind of like, that's something I struggle with, is to like, I'll be like, oh, I'll just like comfortably cruise this. And like when you want to race, when you want to get on the podium, you can't be comfortable. You have to push the envelope a little bit. And that's scary and feels uncomfortable, but racing should be a little bit scary and should feel uncomfortable. So I think practicing being comfortable, getting uncomfortable on technical terrain for me.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, for me, I think something that's worth pointing out is how important drilling the technical downhills was even in the limited amount of time I had on the trails preparing for this. We had our trip to Kentucky and we did a lot of runs together. And then I did one run solo and I really pushed the downhills as much as I could. And then when we went to Boulder doing both of those training runs solo, and man, I ate shit so freaking hard on that first long run, just went yard sailing down Flagstaff. But, my coach, he was like, make your legs sore.
Yeah.
You don't leave this weekend without sore legs. And I've been really thinking a lot about how important that is.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of athletes right now who are training for some really big mountain events, Hard Rock, High Lonesome,
States,
San Juan, Western states. Like this is a badass year for Microcosm. But one of the things that is going to make the difference is really drilling those downhills and not
being really intentional.
Yes, not lollygagging on those downs, like actually in training, running them as hard as you can. Because one, it's not aerobically difficult to run downhill. So you're not stressing yourself aerobically. And two, if your legs feel good, you're going to get all of that benefit of training that system and working on the eccentric loading that happens in the quads. And then when you get to the race, something that, went really well for me is I never lost my legs.
Yeah. Same.
Even on that last descent, which we hiked the 2 days before the race, we went up and hiked it and we were like, man, this is so brutally technical. And I rocked like 8:30 pace down that.
Holy
and like
shit.
That was freaking pretty quick.
Yeah.
And my legs felt really strong. Huh. And coming out onto that road and the climb and running in, I was in like 6:40 pace. And like, that's because I had limited opportunity, but I took the opportunities that I had and I freaking drilled it.
Yeah.
It fell. It felt good. Not really. It was good for the ego. But yeah, it's, sometimes you're going to fall and you've got to get back up and you got to keep pushing those downs because there's no way to replicate that otherwise. You've got to run technical downhills to get the quads prepared if you're running a race that has technical downhill. And thank God it's better to be over prepared for that. We got to Argentina and we were like, this is going to be a cakewalk. I'm going under 7 hours in the 50 for sure. I'm going to finally get close to hitting my PR or matching it. Zoe, you too. And like, that wasn't
Was not
reality.
to be. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess something that I'm carrying forward, I don't know I'm running Leadville, the 100 at the end of August. And something that I want to keep working on is my competitive mindset and accessing that part of me, because I'm very good at going out and being comfortable pushing my potential, but I'm not. I often get stuck in small vision syndrome and not believing enough that I can be on the podium at a big competitive race, and spending time visualizing that is a constant work for me. And I think as a person, I'm looking for people to be like, you can do it. Look at your training, and looking for permission from people. But really, when you're out there in the shit of it all, like, that's only going to come from within. It's only going to come from you. And so continuing to visualize that, and that will definitely be, my goal going into Leadville. And if I do a tune-up race or anything, is to continue to push a little harder from the onset of the race, like I did at this race. And that was something that I was really proud of myself for doing, is I did come from behind to get the podium, which is characteristic of my racing style. But I did push a lot harder from the onset of the race than I normally would have. And that's the kind of stuff that you've got to do if you want to be competitive at the international level.
Yeah. I think one of TJ's new mantras is don't ask for permission, be on a mission.
Yeah.
One of his new things. So
not looking for permission, folks.
He's on a mission.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this one and you got something out of it. Man,
if you
what an experience.
If you loved high school cross country, but also love technical alpine running, this race is for you.
Yeah. And if you like really cool culture,
if you like German food, if you like bratwurst.
Yep.
And beer. We were in the beer capital of Argentina.
Should have taken advantage of that a little bit more than I did, but hey, you're in race mode.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Bye.